Did you know that French words are added to the dictionary every single year? Yes, just like in English and in many other languages. Modern French is constantly evolving with new slang words added all the time. Some of these words are pure slang, while others are created in response to world events and social issues. If you want to become fluent in French, it's important to stay on top of some of these new words. In today's lesson, I will introduce you to some of the most known French words that were added to the dictionary in 2022. C'est parti! So, which words were added to the dictionary this year? Let's start with something soft, which is la mobilité douce or la circulation douce. Literally, soft mobility or the gentle circulation or transportation. The words themselves are not new, but the concept of soft mobility has been trending in France these past few years. It is any form of transportation that is less polluting than the car. In some cases, soft mobility is even restricted to bicycles and walking only. French cities have been creating a lot of des pistes cyclables, in the singular form, une piste cyclable. These are bike lanes. Especially in my city of Grenoble, where everybody is using their bicycle all the time, everywhere. It is related to l'écologie, environmentalism in English. Ooh, that's tricky to say. L'écologie. You will find more vocabulary about it in my blog post for today's lesson. You will find the link in the description below the video. It is all free. But for now, the next word is la gênance. La gênance is a new word for awkwardness. A few weeks ago, I made a lesson about English words that don't translate into French. And one of these was the word awkward. We could have used la gêne or gênant. That could have worked at the translation, but they were not exactly the perfect fit. With American culture spreading more and the influence of the internet, young French people wanted their own word to translate awkward. So they made one, and it's catching up just enough to be featured into the new dictionary. So now, for instance, for an awkward moment, some French people might say un moment de gênance, un moment de gênance. But remember that un moment gênant works really fine as well. This is the kind of vocabulary I'm personally not used to yet, but it is so interesting to see how the language evolves. Speaking of importing American vocabulary to French, our next word for today is le wokisme, for wokism, le wokisme. Yes, France has been importing American culture words with similar issues, but with a barely Frenchified vocabulary. So on one hand, you have conservative journalisms warning about le wokisme, while on the other hand, you have journalists saying they're not even sure it actually exists as a concept. It is a whole thing I really do not want to get into, but for better or for worse, it is now part of the public discourse in France, and it is in the dictionary. And the language evolving means also creating new pronouns as well. As you know, French language is gendered. Everything can be either masculine or feminine. But some circles have been trying to coin a gender-neutral pronoun. It is yel. It is rarely used, but it is still the most successful of the new pronouns. And it can be useful. I personally find these new ways of thinking the language very interesting. It is seen as one of the aspects of l'écriture inclusive, inclusive writing. It is a whole project to reframe gender in the French language in various ways. You will find more in the blog post for today's lesson. And our last American import for today will be la grossophobie, which is fat phobia in English. La grossophobie. This comes from gros, which is an adjective that means big or fat. French people are not immune to obesity. And obese French people face additional hardships and hostility from society that is called grossophobie. Grossophobie. This should not be confused with la glottophobie. glottophobia or accent discrimination, glottophobie. French people have always talked with different accents, from the north to the south and even on different sides of the Loire River.
Alors les Alsaciens, ils sont de très bonne qualité, hein. Ils ont de la bonne bière, ils ont des bonnes blagues et ils savent bien rigoler, hein. Mais parfois l'accent ne le comprend pas toujours, hein.
And now, obviously, with different accents from all around the planet. Yet, curiously, everyone in power or in the media only speak with one accent, which is the Parisian accent. This is the one that you will always hear on TV, in movies, and also here at Academy Franais, I know. Worse still is that a strong accent is very often seen as a joke. And that's sad because, well, accents are cool.
Le tien c'est le tien et le mien c'est le mien, l'accent.
But for now, let's get back to something light and fun that entered the dictionary this year. Le Covid long. Le Covid long, which is long COVID. We also have the adjectives Covidé and in the feminine form Covidé, which is a person who got COVID. Yeah, there isn't much to say here because COVID is kind of part of our lives now. But actually, I want to talk about le Covid. Or is it la Covid? Because you see, 3 years ago, back in December 2019, everybody in France was saying le coronavirus, or le Covid very soon, le Covid. But then l'Académie Franais arrived. And it published a note saying that actually people should say la Covid. So out of thin air in France, official communication started to say la Covid in the feminine form that virtually nobody used in real life. So it's my opportunity to finally talk about l'Académie Franais. The French Academy has been founded in 1634 by le Cardinal Richelieu. It was made to centralize the spelling and definitions of the French language. And immediately you can see two big problems with the project itself. First, we don't really need even more centralization, especially for language. This is a fantastic start for glottophobie, by the way. And second, do they even have the capacity to do that? Who is even in l'Académie? Well, basically, the members of l'Académie are politicians, former politicians, philosophers, a clergyman, a biologist, and very few members with any sort of linguistic or solid grammatical background. So how do they publish new dictionaries regularly to keep the language up to date? Well, they don't. They've only published 8 dictionaries in 400 years. So instead, they publish notes from time to time with poorly justified arguments that don't make sense to kind of influence conservative media and some official forms. And yet, l'Académie Francaise enjoys a huge amount of prestige in French culture. Partly because they call themselves les immortels, the immortals, and get to wear a gorgeous green vest and a ceremonial sword, and that's pretty cool. But with that prestige also comes a lot of money and real estate with practically no oversight. And many French people still think that the people in l'Académie are experts, and that the institution is the guardian of real French when it's not. Okay, that was a rant that could go on for much longer, and I would rather cover some fun words instead. I will leave you with some more thoughts about l'Académie Francaise as well as the link to the fantastic video made by French YouTuber Linguisticae and a written summary of his main points. But if l'Académie doesn't pick up new French words, who does? Well, the words of 2022 in today's lesson come from les dictionnaires, the dictionaries, les dictionnaires. There are two really big popular ones. They're Le Petit Robert and Le Petit Larousse. They're both named after their founders and they're published by for-profit private groups and updated every year with a new edition. Le Petit Larousse was created in the late 19th century and early 20th century and is a bit more conservative and tries to find logical explanations for language changes. Le Petit Robert was created in the 60s and has a bit more sociological view, simply surveying and observing the words that are used. But both of them are simply trying to be seen as a simple reference of how French people actually use their language. The dictionaries are rarely used in 2022. But every year they tell the press which words are now included in their new editions, so people can talk about the dictionaries at least once a year, like we are doing right now. You'll find more about them as well as solid resources and dictionaries to improve your French in the blog post for today's lesson. But for now, let's look at the new French words that are added to the dictionary coming from abroad. We have in particular le baiser, which is literally the romantic kiss, le baiser. Well, it turns out it's also the name of une pâtisserie belge, une pâtisserie belge, a pastry from Belgium. Another delicious new word is le café blanc, literally the white coffee, le café blanc. This time it is from le Liban, Lebanon, le Liban. And it's not really a coffee actually. It is a drink made from hot water, honey and orange blossom water. Then from le Québec, we have le plan chaudrome, le plan chaudrome, the skate park. In France, we simply call it le skate park. It's typical really. When French people can just jump and use an Anglicism, they will. And in Quebec, they can be very protective of their French language, so they often try to find a more appropriate translation instead, which is absolutely fantastic. And since in a skate park you will ride un skate or une planche à roulettes, literally a skateboard in French and in Québécois, une planche à roulettes, it makes total sense to say un plan chaudrome. That's perfect. I definitely could make a whole lesson about the relationship of French language in France and French language in Quebec. It would deserve lots of very careful research. Just tell me in the comments if you would be interested. And now our final word for today. For context, French language has always been influenced by African and Arab languages, and this influence has been more pronounced with immigration since the 1960s. Especially for slang and youth culture. And the latest African word to make it to our French dictionaries is now une go, for a girlfriend. It's slang for the familiar une copine, or in verlan, une meuf. Verlan is a slang form that is very, very common in everyday French, and it can be quite useful for you to learn, because you probably did not learn it at school. So now you can dive into this vocabulary with our next lesson right here, 10 French slang words. Just click here on your screen to access the lesson, and I will see you there. Allez, à tout de suite!